Hi, and welcome back to VEPRA Podcast. Today I'm taking you inside two of the most interesting hearings that I attended yesterday on Capitol Hill, so attended June 23rd. House Rules Committee meeting where lawmakers fiercely debated a packed agenda: DUI, immigration penalties, veterans health care, U.S. military strikes on Iran, federal enforcement tactics, civil rights, and the continuing aftermath of January 6th. The second hearing that I attended was the House Appropriations Committee hearing on the Department of Justice fiscal year 2026 budget. A hearing that raised deep questions about national security, DOJ restructuring, Iranian sleeper cells, and the role of leadership ethics at the Justice Department. Both sessions were intense, emotional at times, and revealed the deep divisions that we're currently facing that are shaping American politics. So let's begin. House Rules Committee highlights. The Rules Committee began with a bill proposing automatic deportations for non-citizens convicted of DUI. Supporters of the legislation presented tragic stories of those killed by impaired drivers and highlighted the significant public safety risks that DUIs pose on U.S. roads. Opponents responded that DUI rates among undocumented immigrants remain low, and that current immigration law already treats DUI as a serious factor in deportation and citizenship decisions. While lawmakers agreed that impaired driving must be addressed, many argued that immigration policy should not be used as a substitute for a broken public safety system. The committee next debated the Military Construction and the Veterans Affairs Appropriation Act, with healthcare and mental health emerging as central issues. Lawmakers and veterans groups strongly opposed efforts to privatize VA healthcare, warning that it would limit access and reduce quality of care for those who served. The tragic rise in veteran suicides, particularly involving firearms, grew strong calls for better protections and more transparent VA funding, with lawmakers urging that proposed staffing cuts should be reversed. The next debate focused on the government's response to recent riots in Los Angeles. While lawmakers from both parties agreed that peaceful protest is a constitutional right, the committee was divided over the militarized response, which cost more than $139 million in tax dollars. Concerns were also raised about shifting priorities within federal agencies, with nearly 25% of DEA resources now began redirected to immigration enforcement, possibly weakening drug enforcement operations at a critical time. The hearing then turned to U.S. military strikes on Iranian targets. Supporters defended the strikes as a necessary response to Iranian threats. But critics, led by Representative McGovern, warned that these actions risk drawing the U.S. into a new conflict without proper congressional approval. In fact, he was very stern, very clear with his message that he does not want another president dragging the United States into another war. Lawmakers stressed that Congress must reassert its constitutional war powers role and avoid repeating the mistakes of past military interventions. Also, there was a claim on why $900 billion had been released to Iran, with members noting that only limited humanitarian funds from frozen assets had been released under tight international agreements. The committee also reviewed ICE enforcement practices with concern that agents are detaining non-citizens without serious criminal records and in some cases during scheduled immigration appointments. So the immigrants will show up to their scheduled appointments, and then ICE will arrest them and then deport them. Lawmakers called for a renewed focus on high priority offenders, so prioritizing criminals who are immigrants, who are illegal immigrants, and greater respect for due process. The conversation also addressed the recent, quote, "No King" protests, which drew millions into the streets and prompted debate about balancing civil liberties with public order during mass demonstrations. The session then closed on, I would say, to be an emotional note, with discussions of the full pardons that were being granted to January 6 rioters. Many members expressed frustration that while these pardons move forward, a plaque honoring the Capitol Police remains blocked from display. A symbolic reminder of how unresolved the political aftermath of that day remains in Congress. The House Rules Committee session offered a raw look at the debates now shaping American law and public life, from immigration enforcement to veterans, healthcare, military engagement abroad, civil liberties, and the legacy of January 6th. These issues will continue to define congressional action in the weeks ahead, and we'll be following them here on VEPRA Podcast. Now let's turn to another critical hearing this week, the DOJ Budget Hearing. The DOJ budget hearing focused on how nearly $8 billion in national security funding is being used, and why the department is asking for more in a time of rising global threats. Attorney General Pam Bondi, now 5 months into a tenure, testified in support of a $33.6 billion budget request, even though it represents a $2.5 billion cut from the prior year, and would eliminate over 5,000 positions, including 1,500 FBI jobs. Lawmakers voiced bipartisan concerns that these cuts could undercut national security efforts just as global instability is increasing. Bondi highlighted the DOJ's successes in fighting drug cartels, pointing to DEA-led takedowns and the devastating impact of fentanyl in U.S. communities. She warned that border security remains essential, as precursor chemicals they continue to enter the country from Mexico and Canada, arguing that without border control, domestic drug enforcement will remain at a disadvantage. The hearing grew tense when the topic of Iranian sleeper cells came up, and Bondi confirmed that over 1,000 Iranian nationals had entered the U.S. illegally between 2021 and 2024, many through the southern border, and the DOJ remains on high alert, investigating numerous potential threats. Lawmakers pushed back on the proposed cuts to national security funding, arguing that now is not the time to scale back these efforts. Another major point of debate was the proposed merger of ATF and DEA, a move many lawmakers warned could weaken enforcement against gun trafficking. Attorney General Bondi defended the proposal, but sharp partisan clashes erupted, particularly when Rep. Madeleine Dean pressed Bondi about her previous work as a registered foreign lobbyist for the government of Qatar. Bondi's evasive response drew criticism for lacking professionalism. The hearing also veered into DOJ leadership ethics, as Bondi was questioned about her personal investments in Trump media stock and cryptocurrency. She acknowledged financial losses in crypto, but failed to provide much clarity on the DOJ ethics policy, raising concerns about transparency. Questions about pardons were brought up again for January 6 rioters, and they were deflected, even as the committee noted that a plaque honoring Capitol Police remains blocked from display, and this was brought up in both hearings. The DOJ budget hearing also revealed deep divisions over how best to structure the fund, the Department of Justice, at a time when national security, border control, civil rights, and leadership ethics remain at the forefront of public debate. Together with the House Rules Committee session, these two hearings offered a powerful glimpse into the forces now shaping U.S. law and policy. We'll continue to follow these stories here on VEPRA Podcast, bringing you insight from inside the room as these debates evolve. And I want to thank you again for listening to VEPRA Podcast. Have a great one.